Previously on 30 to Life.
I grew up in Orange County in Fountain Valley. You know, my parents immigrated here from Vietnam, and so I'm first generation. I kind of always felt like I was too much in my family, and that, I had too much energy, I had too many feelings, and I did start drinking, smoking pot at a young age because that's people that I was hanging out with, and, it just felt like, I remember feeling like it kind of quieted my brain a little bit, and then when I just got introduced to meth, and that was like, it was a wrap after that.
So after you got kicked out of college, I assume that's when, really spiraled out of control and you got in trouble with the law.
It was like all from drug addiction. So it was like sales. A lot of my charges are for sales. And then the strikes just kind of made it different. Towards the end, there was like a few like petty theft, but it all went back to my addiction. They did try to validate me as a gang member in prison. And I was like, I don't even understand what's happening. And so it was just like a different experience, A couple days later, something had happened where we had to like clean the blood off of like our shoes. And I was like, this is like really prison,
Yeah.
That's when I realized I don't want to die in prison.
What did you do in order to make it through?
It's the struggle. And I always tell people, like, the struggle is where you learn what you're made of. Taking the bus taught me how to be like more responsible and these different things. And then like getting fired in sobriety, was at first I was like, why am I even doing this? Like, this is great. I got fired from my telemarketing job that I can do high, but I can't do sober, And I remember like having to make different choices in those moments. And that's when I started to like learn how to rely on my parents. Cause my dad had always told me like, if you need to talk, like I'm here. And I never had trusted that before. And I remember the day that I got fired from my telemarketing job and it was like my ego, I'm like pride, everything. I was like, how can I not do this? And I called him and I told him, and he was like, let's go to breakfast. And he came and picked me up so I didn't have to take the bus. And he just talked to me and he was like supportive, And like, that was like the first time that I was like, okay, maybe they really mean this. And then, there have been other times. And then when I was going through that really bad breakup, like my parents, like I would go and cry at their house. And, and sometimes if I couldn't be at my apartment because like I was so like, just kind of obsessed with like where he's at because he lived 5 apartments down from me, then, I would go to my parents' house and they would welcome me home. But in all those instances, like, I did want to give up. I didn't, I was like, thinking how can somebody who's getting loaded not think that I'm good enough for him? Like, and I saw the girls that he was going with and I was like, are you kidding? And I just kind of wanted to go back to that, getting high and kind of like having it all go away.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go away.
No.
You just kind of mask it, and that's what thankfully I've learned through the program, through all the work that I've done, is that it doesn't go away. So I knew that like, okay, if I get high, it's still going to be there and I'm going to go back to prison. And, I like my pillows. I like my comforts, and I can't imagine going back to prison today.
Right. And so every day is a choice. Mm-hmm. Do you ever find, certain days difficult besides like the holidays or anything like that, maybe?
No, not really. I think it's become, but I had to do a lot of work to get to this point. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the work with my sponsor, the work with my therapist to really get to where today, like, if something happens, like where something's going on, like I know I can talk to somebody about it. So I'm not really bottling things up like I was before to get to the point where it's like, now it's like unmanageable. So I get to talk about things. I have like a really good support group of friends that like I could talk to. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps to keep things so where like, we talk about like, when the high that you have when you're high, right? Mm-hmm. But then as I always say, as high as the high is, that's as the low is going to be just as like, it's like inversely, Okay. And I may not have like the big highs and lows, but like, I'm like kind of like just little blips, and that's better. That's like, there are some days, like it doesn't go like my way, but it's okay. Cause I know that like I have the tools and I have the things that like I can to get through it.
Right. So the tools definitely work if you work them.
Yes.
You've mentioned a therapist. I'm not a believer in therapy. I've never done it. They tried to make me do it in prison. And I went in there and bullshitted my way through things. Mm-hmm. But I see that for you, it's really working, and you're working the program and it's working for you. Is the biggest thing just being able to speak to someone that maybe just be educated on the brain and how it works and how it functions? Is that what it is? Yeah.
I think for me, like therapy is a chance to like kind of make the connection. So with my therapist, we talk about like the little parts of us, right? So when I'm sharing something, she's like, oh, I hear like your littles. And that's like the part that like has broken off. And so, you know, being able to like kind of identify like how old is that little, like where did that come from? And being able to like integrate that part back into myself. It's called parts work. And it kind of like helps make you like, you know, so that you're whole again. And so sometimes for myself, when I act, like when I'm, you know, kind of like lashing out at somebody, that's like the littles driving, right? That's not me driving. That's like the part of myself that's like coming out. And those are like from, like protective systems, you know, that's like something that as like a child that kept me safe. Right. And so maybe for myself, like I couldn't speak up, but that little part would come out and like kind of be like, hey, you know, and like defend me. And so with therapy, it's kind of being able to integrate those parts and to see like what's driving me. So I don't have like the like, let's say like the insecurities, like the character defects that used to drive who I was, you know, and now they're like kind of like a whisper. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I hear you, but it doesn't like, I'm aware of it. So it doesn't like it doesn't come out, if I don't know if that makes sense.
That's interesting. And you know, what you're speaking about there is that a lot of people who are just living their everyday lives, who drink or just do drugs or whatever, you know, they're just going through life. They're not really aware of their thoughts and how it really drives their life. But you are now, and you're aware of certain thoughts that pop up in your head, and you know that this has to do with my addiction side or my side that's not really working with who I am today.
Yeah, you know, so there's like a saying like in the program is that when I find some like when something in somebody else like gets me irritated, right? Then that's like the mirror of myself getting like my behaviors getting reflected back at me, and we have the hardest time seeing our own behaviors. So I know that when I am irritated or I get a reaction from somebody, that's a part of myself that I need to work through, and that's what the program and my therapist have like we've really been like working on. And so when I like anger is my thing. So when I get angry, I know that there's something like beneath there, you know? And so when I get angry or when I get irritable, then I kind of see it as an opportunity. Now, okay, cool. Like this is like what God's showing me that I need to work on now, you know? And I don't know, like I know in the universe is that when you kind of keep experiencing the same lesson over and over, it's because there's something that you haven't learned yet.
True story. Yes.
You know? And so I keep seeing like the patterns of, it's maybe not the person that's in front of me that I'm reacting to. It's like the person from the originating story, like from back then. So I have to figure out where did this start from? And so I do that with my therapist, and then we do that work, you know? A lot of the stuff had come from like my relationship with my mom. And I ever since I started therapy and like, you know, from in my teenage years and everything, people always told me if you can fix a relationship with your mom, like a lot of things will fall into place. And my mom, it's like weird because I feel like she is doing therapy in secret, but she's not. So now when something comes up, always the best thing to do is to be able to go to the person and be like, hey, when this happened, this is how I felt. And to have that person say, you know, I'm so sorry for that. What can I do so that it doesn't happen again? Right. And that's like the best way to resolve it. Sometimes you can't always do that. So you have to do it with somebody else. But with my mom, I've been able to go back and be like, hey, Mom, when I was a kid, you know, like this is how I felt. And like she will take ownership of it. Before she would start to blame herself, and she would like, it would make it about her. Right. And now she's able to say like, I'm sorry I did that to you. Like I can see how that could be hurtful for you, and I won't do that again. And she doesn't do it again. And so like that's the next part. And now like she'll catch things like, I think one time I had spilled something, and she said the look on my face was like I was in fear. And this was like 2 years ago, you know, I'm like an adult, but in fear of like what she was going to do. And she realized that stemmed from like our childhood when she used to hit me, and, you know, and I'm not saying my mom was abusive, but you know, that's just what we did. And so she's able to recognize that, and like she can see that now. And she like, well, before you sometimes even saying things, she'll be like, hey, I noticed that like this happened, so I'm sorry.
Man, that's really good. You know, that you got a beautiful mom like that to recognize that. A lot of parents don't seem to understand that, you know, and I don't blame parents because, they're doing what they got to do to
Yeah.
raise their children. And it's kind of hard for them to sit back and like really see their actions, because especially when they're just trying to make it every day. But as a young person, it goes back to what you and I were talking about. As a young person, we're really influenced and troubled by certain things, and it does carry into our adulthood. Like you said, you're like, "Whoa, am I going to get in trouble for
Yeah.
this?" And you're a grown adult now. It's crazy how deeply rooted these childhood traumas are within ourselves, and if people don't recognize that, like you were saying with the thoughts and everything, if people don't recognize that, they can cause a lot of problems for themselves. They drug habits or bad relationships or just not communicating with people right. So you're kind of turning my opinion on therapy. I kind of just learned to walk around in my life without therapy and just say I'm just not going to take things personal from people, because I usually do. I deal with anger too. Being Samoan, we're kind of like one side, we're just happy, great people, and then you piss us off, and we're just off the hook after that. I know some Vietnamese friends that deal with a lot of that too. So what do you do now besides, you got these tools to work with, but let's say for someone who's not used to working the tools, what would you tell them? Would you tell them to go on a walk? Would you tell them to get around people that they can talk with? What would you say to them in order to deal with these things that you went through?
So I think it's like different things work for different people, but I always say like taking that minute to pause, like you can always come back and say something later on, but once you say it, like you can't take it back, right? And so it's that pause. And what I've learned too is that our brains, if we delay that gratification just even by a minute, then it stops, like it breaks that like cycle. But once we start to feed into it, then it just escalates. And that's what I learned when I first got sober with cravings. Like when I first have a craving, if I give into the thought, then it's going to get worse until I act on it.
Right.
But if I'm able to take a break, and when the first time I got like a really big craving in treatment, I had some like the counselors stop and talk to me, and like in 5 minutes I was like, oh, I'm good, I can go back to group. And they're like, and that's when I realized that you just have to distract yourself. So it's taking that couple minutes to go take some deep breaths, do some grounding exercises, go call somebody. But even if it's just a couple minutes, it just shifts everything,
Grounding.
Yeah,
Right.
that grounding, and it's so important.
Okay. I have friends that deal with, alcohol and other things. So that's why I'm asking you all this. We kind of got stuck there. So you go back into the prisons, and what do you do there? What's going on with that?
So the first couple times I went back, it's usually with a self-help group. So I went with Insight Garden Program. They're at a few of the prisons where they go in and they do gardening, right? They have a garden inside the prison, and they learn how to take care of it, and they talk about it. And so I went for the graduation, and it was really cool. And, it was a group of us who are all in higher education. And so as we're talking to these guys, we're kind of giving them that hope that like, hey, like we've literally all been in this seat before, listening to facilitators come in, and that there is hope on the outside. Like there are people that can support you. There's resources. We really push a lot the higher education because, it's not the only way out, but it is one of the biggest ways out of the life, is getting more education and kind of being able to use your experience. So, but I remember the first time I went back in, and the gate like clinked, and when I heard it, it kind of like it freaked me out a little bit. And then kind of being around the blue and the green, and I really was anxious that first time, and I was like, I don't know if I like this, but it's gotten better since then, but it still like is weird. And there's still sometimes that like at one of my internship sites, it was at high risk youth, and so an after school program. I remember we were out on the blacktop, and it was kind of hot. There was like kids running around, noise, and their bell sounded like an alarm. And I remember thinking, we have to get down on the yard right now. And then I looked around, I'm like, nobody's getting down. And then it clicked that like, I'm not in prison. But for a minute I was like about to get down. And cause it's everything, it just like the noise, the blacktop, the sound of the thing. And so it's like still things that like come back, but Yeah, it was going back into prison though. That was a different experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, and you explained it. Would you say that's PTSD?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
definitely. So you're going through a lot just to get back in there and share your story with the people in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what does it feel like though, just knowing that you can walk in and leave? Doesn't that feel great?
It does feel great, but the first time I was a little like, like you're gonna let me back out, right?
Yeah.
It does feel really good to be able to walk out, and I think every time I'm clear at all the gates, then I'm like, and I mean not just all the gates, but like even the last guard shack, then I'm like, okay, like like I'm out, and because it's hard,
Right.
to being trapped in there, and I think though I have a hard time when I leave though because of all the people that are still in there, and there's a lot of changes that are being made in the prison right now, a lot of positive changes, and and that's good to see. But there's still so much more that needs to be done.
Right. Right. So how long you've been involved with this program going in there?
So I went like over the summer. I'm trying to get involved in more different programs. I think right now because of my school schedule, it's hard for me to go back in. Mm-hmm. But I eventually do want to go back in with like the Compassion Prison Project. Have you heard of them?
No.
Oh, you need to look them up.
I'm interested. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. So the Compassion Prison Project, they look at ACEs. Are you familiar with ACEs?
No.
ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, right? So there's like 10 questions that ask like, have you ever seen somebody with some like abused in front of you? Have your parents done drugs? It has 10 questions. And the higher the score that you have on the ACE score, the more that you are likely to have, like physical health problems, mental health, like it impacts the development of, everything. And it leads to criminality. Like, so if
Right.
people, not that everybody who has high ACE scores commits crime, but most people who commit crime have a high ACE score, especially a lot of the men were lifers. So at Lancaster, the first time they did it, this is a level 4 yard. And they had all these guys, like probably like 100 guys out on the yard. And she asked these questions. And any time that they had a yes, they were supposed to step into the circle. So you have these guys that were admitting in front of everybody that they were abused,
Right.
that they had seen abuse, that
Right.
they had, and all these, and that's vulnerability.
Yes.
And then afterwards they talked about it. So she takes, and that's where they really have these trauma talks of like, how do your childhood experiences, how do they impact you, And even in prison, like, how did that shape who you were in prison? And you have these guys who are able to admit that, because as a child I was molested, I was abused, that like now in prison I have to be like this person. And because of that, and that's huge, And so I have a few friends that are involved in that. And so I want to go back in and do that. They're actually at different prisons, and they did one with the COs too, talking about like the trauma that they experienced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Nice.
you should look into that.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I've always wanted to, go back in and speak with the guys and let them know, hey, man, if I can do it, you can do it. There's hope. Because a lot of the guys in there, they don't have hope.
No, they
Yeah.
don't. And I think that's like the lack of hope is what gets it to where you're making these, because if you feel like you're never going to get out, then why would you do anything to help you get out?
Exactly.
So you're going to choose the life where
you're at.
where you're at,
Right.
and to be the best in that life, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, so that's good that, like you said, they're making changes in there, and then they're allowing groups like you and to come in there and speak with them. That's really good. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so to hear that, I'm glad to see that. I would love to get involved with something like that.
Yeah, I can hook you up with some of the people, but there's like so many groups that are coming in, and it's funny that you talk about the changes that are happening with the youth, right? The ones that were convicted as adults, and a lot of the things are changing. So my internship right now is at Project Kinship in Orange County, and Project Kinship is kind of based off of Homeboy Industries. But what we do differently is that we do a lot of like the therapy, we do a lot of the clinical, and we do not only like the gang intervention or the reentry services, but we're at schools, right? So we're at like schools where there's a lot of gang activity. We have teams there.
Wow.
And then we're also, with like Whitey, like with the CYA closing everything, they were sending everybody to the county and then releasing them. A lot of the kids from Orange County, and I still call them kids even though they're adults because they're kids. they get released to like kind of they have to do services with us, you know.
Oh, okay.
And so where they get a therapist, a substance abuse counselor, a case manager, a peer navigator. And we check in with the courts with them. We give progress reports, and because they realize, that these kids don't know how to navigate life, and you cannot take them from when they thought that they were going to die in prison and throw them out on the streets and expect them to be successful.
Right.
So we're doing a lot of these programs. We go into the juvenile hall. We go into the different youth detention centers so that we can start to work with the youth before they come out to help them like integrate into society. You know. We're at the jails too. So as soon as people get out, it's like, hey, like, do you want something to eat? Do you want something to drink? And it's kind of like having that, like, we have emergency housing. So you don't have anywhere to go. Then like, let's do a quick screening and you can go into our house, and then we'll try to get you placed into long-term after that. Because if you think about it, a lot of people come out, they don't have anything. So what do you go back to? You go back to like how you're going to support yourself.
So the neighborhood,
I think when I went to a PAC meeting, and that's when I started to see like really that they're changing is when I got out, I was like, when I got out of parole, then I went to that PAC meeting, and they were like, you're a fucking piece of shit. We're going to catch you. We're going to put you back in. Like, we're just waiting for you to slip up, and this last PAC meeting that I went to, they were like, welcome home. We've missed you. We're here to support you. And I was like, what the hell? What is happening? But, I think it's just that like the changing, and California really is the beginning of the movement, and
you're all in it.
Yes, I love it.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I know this too because I do see the future. And I see that the new counselors, the new therapists, they're going to be people like us who've been to prison, who have dealt with drugs and things like that. It's going to be a different story, and you're right, they're involved in it. And I think that's really cool what you mentioned about the kids. If only they had that when I was in CYA, or even homegirl that you mentioned, that got all that time, so she could have benefited from something like that as well. But yeah, I'm so glad they closed YA down.
Me too. That's like crazy to think, that that these kids would get sentenced to that, and that you would go like it's like the worst like solution to the problem, It
is.
And all you're doing is like, because YA is like harder than like the adult prisons, because you have people who are trying to make, like, you have kids that like their brain isn't formed. They're on all these hormones, emotions, and they need to prove who they are. And how do you do that in prison? You're the most violent person.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that sounds like a lovely program. I'd love to get involved in something like that. So let's talk a little bit about healing. What practices or strategies have you found like that were most effective in healing for yourself? What do you do?
Therapy.
Always therapy, huh?
No, really at first it was the 12 steps and working with a sponsor, but that's kind of like a therapy too. I don't know if you're familiar with the steps, but kind of getting to and like having to do that 4th and 5th step, and having to like really look at who you are and to see like, when this happened, like what part of me did it hit, like what part of me, and then looking to see like letting go of the resentments, and then doing the amends, and, first going back to my family and being like, I'm so sorry that I did this, like, and being able to like name a few things, and then like asking them like for forgiveness, and then letting them know that like, hey, moving forward, like, what can I do to make this better, and I think we talk about that forgiveness, but it's like, that's when I started to forgive myself, and it was helpful that like, of course, that like my family was able to like say like, oh, we just want the best for you, but that was really where I started to like forgive myself for the things that I had done, and to really, to really take that ownership of that. Like, I'm not the victim anymore. I'm not the victim because I had a part in all these things. I had, like I played a part in this, and that like, and once I took that, then it kind of like gave me that empowerment of like, if I made these choices, that means I can make different choices. But if I kind of in that mentality of that, like, oh, all this stuff happened to me, then I can't control any of that, And so once I started to take that power of that, like, so when things happen, I look into like, okay, what's my part in this? What can I do differently? And if a lot of times I do have to go back and be like, hey, I'm so sorry I did that yesterday. Like, but thankfully, like, because I'm able to catch like those behaviors like kind of quicker, I don't have to make as many amends like now, you know?
Right. I love that, taking accountability. And I'm curious, how was that process on forgiving yourself though? I know that for me and my experience, I try to do that a lot. I do, because I do understand that I punish myself a lot. So I'm in that phase. So forgiving myself has been very difficult, and loving myself. How do I, get over that hump? Is it just going and making amends with people like you were saying?
So I think it is making amends with people, but I think it's really is for myself is I had to believe that I was worthy of my own love. And I didn't believe that for a long time. And that's why I couldn't really receive it from anybody else, because I didn't have it for myself. So for me, I had to learn how to like love who I am and like embrace all the parts of me, right? And the parts that need work, the parts that like, and to practice. And it's hard. Like I have people like my therapist and like other people that I talk to, like, I don't know how to practice grace with myself. I want to always be like this, like straight A student, all these things, right? These goals. And I have to realize that even with like, I'm okay, and that like, sometimes I'm not going to do everything perfect, but I'm learning, and I think with myself, it's still hard to practice that grace, but I do love who I am today. I know that like, I'm not perfect, but I'm comfortable in my own skin for the first time, in my whole life.
Beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. I think I'm doing really good in life. But as far as, I've did a lot of violent things in the past that I've went and served time for, but I still feel, forgiving myself is very hard. For this last time I went into prison, it was just a fight, drunk, partying, and no weapons. Just, I told you a little bit about it, and he suffered from brain injuries, and unfortunately passed away. And during the trial, I listened to his family, his wife, his kid, and me being, a husband, a father, and having my kid. And it's been really hard for me to forgive myself for participating in that, even though I wasn't the one that actually took his life, but just being there and participating, I really, really feel like shit. And it's been very hard for me to forgive myself and just like say, hey, you were young, you made that mistake, because he's not here and I'm here and I'm enjoying my best life. And he should be too, with his family and his kid. So yeah, that's what I go through a lot. So that's why I was asking you that. Maybe I'm just looking for some therapy here. But,
sounds like it. No, I think like, honestly, like, especially like with our cultures, we have this like idea of what therapy is, right? And really it's a chance for you to just be able to talk about things. Yeah. And the therapist, all that happens on the other side is that they ask a question, right? Yeah. And it's always, as soon as your unconscious is like is able, like where you're there, then it will start to like open up and you'll start to go down things. But therapy is not a beautiful process. It is, but it doesn't feel good in the middle of it. So, and that's just giving you a heads up, is that like, if you do go through it, like because you're digging into it, right? Yeah. And as you bring the things up, the feelings come up. So it's hard, but then just knowing that like, you're going to get through it on the other side. You just have to keep going. Right. Right. And then once you start to do it, like, my therapist, she goes, you're a quick person. Cause as soon, like sometimes like it'll click and I'll be like, oh, okay. And then I'll like be able to like process through it pretty quickly. There's like one thing that I'm kind of stuck on right now, but I think it's like that, like deeper stuff, right? That we're kind of going through, that like the stuff that's really buried, but I feel like everybody should do therapy. It's like it's like where you get an hour just to focus on you. Yeah. And like nothing else. And, sometimes it's even just like talk, like, how you're doing this, like, right. And like, I watched on some of your podcasts, like people get emotional because you're asking them like these questions. Right. So like, think about like, if somebody was just kind of asking you like the right question that would like get like for you to like be able to process that. And as you talk and process it, then you're like, working through it.
Getting through it. Right. And that's what I found this podcast to be for myself, is just something for where I'm able to express, kind of get it off my chest and talk about those things. But, of course I don't share everything. It seems like it, but I don't. So yeah, I'm starting to think more different about therapy. So these stories that we're talking about, they're very powerful, and they're a very powerful tool for change for a lot of people. How do you envision your experiences and what the future is going to be for you on making this positive impact in the world? How do you envision that?
So I actually have like very specific goals in mind. So right now I'm completing my master's in social work, and at Cal State Long Beach. And when I first went back to school, I thought I was going to work in substance abuse, because I've been working in drug and alcohol treatment since I got sober. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, do something like that and maybe do therapy, individual therapy. And then when I started to see reentry and I started to see like the growth that was happening, and I felt like that's my calling. And so like, I feel like, when things are right for you. And I felt like this reentry, the work that was being done. And so my first goal was that, and it's from like the Compassion Prison Project. I feel like that's such a weird thing to like say, CPP, is really seeing like, we have these programs in prison that don't really do anything. It's just like a very surface level thing. And if we really, really want to talk about rehabilitation and we want to reduce recidivism, we have to look at the underlying causes. What was it that drove you? What, like looking at all the childhood, looking at these things. So my goal was to create a curriculum for the prisons that would begin to address like the underlying, and so that, because if people don't understand why they do things, they will go back and do the things eventually. Again, yeah. That sometimes it's a Band-Aid, sometimes it's like this. They may be able to stay out, but if you don't understand what makes you tick and what's going to flip that switch, then it's going to happen, and you don't really have that control over it. So I wanted to write curriculums that could be used for the prisons, used for when people get out, to like really work through a lot of that stuff, And then, I work with Project Rebound and Rising Scholars, Project Kinship, and these are all like reentry things. So I would like to continue to we are building so much in California that is other states, other universities are paying attention to what we're doing here. And especially, like I said, with Project Kinship, is that we're doing a lot of groundbreaking things for reentry. Like, the fact that no other county has a team that's like there when you get out of jail for somebody to like talk to and plug in right with services, right? Right. And doing like kind of this full wraparound. And so, we're building these programs here. And I was just in the University of Wyoming with Project Rebound to talk to them about why Project Rebound is necessary, why, and Wyoming is a very conservative, very... Right. And at the University of Wyoming, it's the majority of the students there are in criminal law, like they're all future law enforcement. So being able to talk to like future POs, future police officers, and kind of showing them that like, hey, look beyond the crime, like there's a reason beyond that. And that I always say second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances matter. We're not all going to get it on the second time. We're not all going to get it on the 10th time, But there is hope and there is rehabilitation. It's just like, how do you approach it? And so being able to go with Project Rebound to the University of Wyoming and to share that with them, and hopefully as they're like growing in their careers, they'll remember that we were all people, and I think it's these programs and reentry is to show that the people and the public is that we're not just a crime. We're not just a statistic. We are human beings. And, and I tell people that like, there's probably like maybe like 2 or 3% of the people in prison who like they are the true sociopaths, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
But the majority, like the vast majority of people who are in prison have had childhood abuse, have had these adverse childhood experiences that shaped them, and that led to something that there's something, nobody goes out and just does things, right? There's something that happened. And so that's what we have to address. We don't have to, like the crime, yes, of course there has to be a consequence. But if we don't want like people to go back to prison, we have to address the underlying thing. And so that's like my goal is to like help be a part of that movement to, to address that and to like start to remove the barriers. Cause like, thankfully they don't ask for that criminal background on an application anymore. There's some things, but still it's slow, but like there's progress that's happening. And I think just being a part of that and being able to help build a programs that can be taken to other states, other countries is like, I'm super passionate about. And I'm able to, with social work, take my lived experience and with an education and like drive it into something that hopefully can make a big impact.
Love it. Love it. How are they receiving it when you're talking to them about this type of thing?
Actually, they were open to it. They had a lot of like at the University of Wyoming, they had a lot of questions, and I think people are just starting to see like they're changing their minds. And so a research study that I'm working on right now with Dr. Banal, he's our executive director, is does trauma-informed training impact sentencing?
Okay.
So my study is that like if judges receive training on like childhood experiences and how that can affect like choices and everything, would that change how they would sentence somebody? Can they start to see like the person and not the crime?
Right.
And so that people aren't getting like, okay, yes, if something happened and you killed, like there should be a consequence. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be, but should somebody be getting 98 years? Should somebody be getting 25 to life or something like that, and being able to like factor that in so that there's more like of an informed, like a holistic like approach to it.
A lot of this stuff you're talking about, I've heard, but I've never met anyone that's actually doing it. So, this is new. This is actually new what you're speaking on. And I love that the fact that you guys are taking it to different states as well. California needs a lot of help, of course, with our system and everything, and those who are incarcerated here. But man, that's a beautiful thing that you're doing. I'm very interested in it, and I'm gonna follow your whole career on this. So, if you could have a heart-to-heart conversation with your younger self, what would you tell yourself?
It's funny. Like I get asked this a lot, right? And I think sometimes people think that like, that I would make different choices. I would still like make the choices that I would make. But what I would do is I would tell my younger self is that one day you will get to a point where all the things that you've been through will make sense. That you will get to a point where because of all the things that you went through, it brought you to a place where you were able to like really do some work on yourself. And that because of that work, you were able to find who you were and that you were able to find your passion and that you were able to love yourself. And that one day you will love yourself. You just have to kind of get through some things.
Yeah. I wish a lot of people could realize that when you're going through it, you really don't see tomorrow. You just know that in this moment right now, it's the worst part of my life ever.
Yeah, I think, if I changed any part of my story, I wouldn't be sitting here in this chair with you today. I wouldn't be this person today. And I needed to kind of go through all those things so I could get to this point. So it kind of like, where I was forced to like make some changes, and I had to make that choice of like, do I take this road or this road? And thankfully I've continued to choose the road that has led me here. But, and if let's say it's like, I would have told myself like, don't do this because you're going to go to prison. But then I wouldn't be able to do this work with the prison, with reentry. And I wouldn't be able, to be able to like, be in this position to understand the trauma that we go through while in prison and like work on a solution.
Yeah. You're definitely doing God's work. You're doing big things with this. I love it, and it's so needed.
Yeah.
Definitely needed. I was going to end on that question, but let's end on this. What would you tell women out there that are watching you and, they may be going through the same things as you. They may have been incarcerated. They might be dealing with drugs, alcoholism. What would you tell these women out there right now that are just feeling like, the world's coming down on them? They just don't know what to do. What's their first move they should do if they want to get out of this life that they're living right now?
And you ask for help, like you have to be able to like ask for help. And there's so many, and that's like it's funny. It's like, that's like the hardest thing that it's to do is because that takes like, kind of like working through that pride and ego, but asking for help, that we're out here, like, there are women out here that will support you. There are women out here that will be there and hold your hand, When I say support, it doesn't mean like, that women who will hold your hand and walk alongside of you as you work through these things. You know, there's a lot of services that are available. And I think it's just like just asking for help, because that's like the biggest thing. If you don't ask for help, then we can't help you.
You're really big on that, on communicating with others and just getting people to support and help you out. I love that. A lot of us feel alone. We feel like we can't turn to no one. Even a lot of us feel like we can't turn to our own family. So that's the biggest step, is to just reach out and to ask, hey, I need some help.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And for those women who may be in a abusive relationship right now, and they just can't see themselves leaving, or just can't see themselves with someone else, or being away from this person, what would you say to them as well if they're watching you right now?
I would say that, like, you know, you are worth more than what that person is giving you, and that you are worth more than that you believe in this moment, you know. But I understand that, like, sometimes it's hard to leave those relationships, and that if you're not ready today, it's okay. I mean, because a lot of times we get this, like, why you have to leave them, you should. And that creates a lot of the shame, and it puts us more into that of like not wanting to reach out. But the thing is that, like, when you're ready, you'll be ready. But until then, just know that, like, there is more, you know, out there, and that you are deserving of love. You are deserving of respect. You are deserving of a happy life. And that it's waiting, you know, when you're ready. And if you're not ready today, it's okay too. It's fine. I love you. There's women who still love you. There's people who love you. And just like, when you're ready, we're here to help.
There it is there. And I will definitely have all your information up and everything, just in case some of these women might just feel comfortable with reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you may have feel that I didn't cover during our conversation right now that you might want to add?
Just going back to, like, things are changing for reentry right now, and that there are a lot of services. There's so many programs out there that there's all this funding. So, like, right now, like, reentry is like the hot thing. So there's a lot of funding. So, like, when people parole in Orange County, like, we have like six to 10 organizations who are like, come with us, you know? And there's so much help out there. It's just like kind of getting plugged into it. And like I said, I know a lot of Orange County resources. I know a lot of LA County resources. But if you're not from those counties and you still need help, I'm sure we can find something, you know. I'm like, there's people, I know people who know people, you know, and the movement is growing, and there's so much help for the people, you know. There's help with like higher education. There's help with like, you know, treatment, different things. It's just kind of like reaching out. And, you know, like I said, if I may not have the answer right away, but I can probably find somebody who knows the answer. Right.
Do you know if there's anything like that out here in Northern California?
Yes. So there is Project Rebound out here.
Okay.
And so Project Rebound is for like California State universities, right? And so it's actually was started at San Francisco State.
Oh.
And Sac State is actually a big one too, because they are plugged right into Old Folsom and I think New Folsom, where they have the bachelor's programs there.
Okay.
They have housing too. When guys get out, they can go into their housing, continue with the education. There's that. And so there's so many programs, like Insight Garden Project. There's A Place for Grace. There's like so many programs that can help, like with housing, with places. Like a lot of these programs, if you start with like Insight Garden Program, right, in the prison, when they'll pick you up, right? They'll pick you up, take you to go get clothes.
Where was this?
I know, right? Take you out to eat. Like they find out like what do you want to eat when you get out? So, and they have like services that they can continue and like provide, you know? So it's there. It's just kind of getting plugged into it.
Okay. Well, there you have it, you guys. If the help is out there, unless you were growing up when I was growing up.
Right.
But today the help is out there, and you can't miss it, really, is what she said.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast, sharing all this wonderful information. I know that it's going to help people. Sharing your story, it really will make an impact on a lot of our viewers. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm like so grateful that you have like this forum, and like, you know, that, you know, you can reach out to people that like, because, you know, podcasts are like a big thing that people are doing right now. And I think it's just great that you're having this space. And I really am glad that, you know, you invited me to be here, and I'm super like honored to be sitting here with you.
Thank you. And we will definitely keep in touch, because I'm very interested in on the next moves you're going to make. And hopefully we can get you on here again. Yeah, and we'll talk more about different things and just continue the conversation. So y'all know what it is. Stay the fuck out of trouble.